5 hot deer habitat improvements. And a few of these that have asterisks right here, you can complete very quickly. And so I'm always about doing those 20% of activities that give you 80% success. And that's the way it is in life and most things. And when it gets down to it, especially when it comes to deer hunting, there's a lot of time you can waste. Even if it's something good for your land, doesn't mean you're not better time spent somewhere else working on another project that hits hard. And these are 5 hard-hitting investments of your time and money that can pay off big time. And you notice number 1 doesn't have an asterisk by it. You notice number 5 has an asterisk by it, but I didn't fill it in yet. So you're gonna have to wait all the way to the end. In fact, I have the pen right here, so I'll write it in there at some point, but that's a real hot one. Number 1, conifer screening. Put that number 1. It is awesome to do, you know, for screening roads, food plots, woodline edges. I love conifer screenings, and for a long time I've been preaching that I really like those alternating rows of spruce and pine. Typically you're putting the pine on the inside because you want fast growing pine. Like up north you're using a red pine. So you want that on the inside because eventually those pines are going to lose their lower limbs. They're going to grow pretty tall. And you want that spruce border of white spruce, Norway spruce, blue spruce, whatever it is that fits your land, soil, location, Black Hill spruce, the best. And that'll be that permanent screen. And then you have those conifers. So what I've been teaching for a long time is alternating rows where you don't go by your conservation district spacing. That could be 10, 12 feet because they'll say, well, what's it for? Wildlife. Well, it's actually for screening and for a thick screening edge and a screening wall. You plant those 10, 12 feet apart. You drive around the countryside all the time and you see those well-spaced conifers. They're 8 years, you know, 8 feet tall, 10 feet tall, and they're still 6 feet apart. That's bad. Someone should have doubled up those spacings. What I like doing is you have alternating rows. So let's say your road is right here. You know, that's your road right here. You're screening off this field that's just out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant alternating rows spaced about 6 feet apart of spruce, 2 rows. So this is a 6 foot spacing right here, just between the two. And then you're going to alternate those. So really looking at it straight on, you have a tree every 3 feet. They're spaced out appropriately. And then those rows can be about 6 feet apart, if that makes sense. What I like to do is I'll take a pine like red pine, a quick growing pine, and I'll alternate those. So you have 2 rows of pine, 2 rows of spruce. Spruce on the outside. If the pines lose their lower limbs, if you want to cut them down, doesn't really matter. You have that permanent screen on the outside. And you might even add switchgrass to that, and we'll talk about that in a second. But those red pine, a lot of times if you keep them weed free, you keep the deer from eating them or destroying them with their antlers, rubbing them, then you can get those at 5 years to 7, 8 feet tall. And if you're spacing them out 6 feet, you're going to get a really nice wall. And then those spruce will start to fill in at year 10, 11, 12, 13, somewhere around there where they're really thick. And by that time, if your red pines are starting to lose their lower limbs, that's okay because your spruce are starting to fill in. And if you want screening quick, fast, without much money or time spent, then switchgrass can offer that in that 6 foot range, 7 foot range, 8 foot range within 2 years, the second growing season. We have switch out on the property right now. There's a couple sprigs that were already 5 feet from last year. So in 1 year, they grew 3 to 5 feet. And this year we expect those to be 7 or 8 feet tall. And that only takes place in 2 years. And in the first year, a lot of times it's thick enough to hold rabbits here and there, maybe a pheasant. And so pretty thick just that first year alone. And boy, if you're putting in a quarter-mile stretch, if you do the math, 20 feet wide of switchgrass, you're going to spend about $50, and you're going to spend half hour, 45 minutes of spraying time, and about 20 minutes of seeding time with a hand spreader. And if you're wondering how to plant switch, just look up switchgrass for whitetail, switchgrass for wildlife, how to frost seed switchgrass. All my content comes up to the top. That's the same with most whitetail categories. If you want to find my videos, use YouTube as a search engine for my stuff. It usually is right up on top and you can find it, and I appreciate you using that and trying to learn more. Switchgrass, that's why I have an asterisk there. That can be a quick one. That can be something that you can do right now. And we expect some of our woods edge where we're planting switchgrass this year for entrance exits to stand locations and blocking our access visibility from deer inside the woods. When that gets up to 3 feet and it's really thick, that's working just this year. So that can be a one growing season screen that you can use if that height is okay for you. It happens real quick. Red osier dogwood. One of my favorite things to do up north, I've talked about red osier dogwood for a long time, is making browse plots, where if you had that red osier dogwood mix in swamps, whether it's travel corridors, you want to set up a nice stand location on a funnel that connects two woodlots in a swamp, you're getting out there, especially during, whether it's dry in late summer or during the winter, and you're mowing that down to a foot high, and then you're letting it regenerate. It's a renewable, high-value browse for deer. You can also cut stems, jam them into the ground. You probably get 80–90% to live. You have to make sure they're not underwater, although in the future they can be underwater for certain periods of time. They just can't when they're young, and it can't be completely bone dry, and the deer browse them greatly. So there's a few and in there you have to make sure of. But red osier dogwood, even just cutting those browse pockets, can be an immediate success for your area. And think about it, a lot of those red osier dogwoods, they might only get to 8 to 10 feet high, but all that browse is above deer level. When you get that down to the ground, you can see every stem that's close to those deer, they've nibbled on, eaten, and tasted. It's almost like a tea during the winter time. And then even in the dead of winter, when it's 10 degrees out, it's pliable. There's actually a green coating. When you rip off the red, it's almost like taking the layer off an apple. And if you taste it, it's actually got a little bit of give to it. It's not super stiff. It's a little bit soft, and you can understand why deer eat it, because it's not too bad for us to eat either if you try it out. Travel corridors and bedding. Now this one can take a while, but if you have open switchgrass areas, if you have upland cover, gray dogwood, weeds, goldenrod, just simply mowing a path to connect point A to point B, slight curve in there. You don't want a straight line where deer can see 100 yards, 50 yards at a time. They don't like that. But if you're just curving it, maybe bowing it outside to your stand location, connecting 2 points of woods, connecting a woods to a food plot, that can be a perfect way to define exactly where deer move. And there's a few other things you can do along in that stand location too, along with the travel corridor. That can happen pretty quick. Now, chainsawing travel corridors in the woods takes more time. If you look up chainsawing travel corridors and creating travel corridors, you'll find more content on how to do that. But you're cutting trees to fell them perpendicular to the trail, to the deer trail, so deer can slip in and out. You never want a cattle chute where deer need to be prodded to go through that. They want to be able to escape left or right, so you want your trees to fall perpendicular to the line of movement. That takes a little bit more time, but just that mowing can be something you can do right now. And then bedding area work. If you have mature timber, just dropping an occasional mature tree every 40–50 yards will thicken up the area. It'll allow more sunlight to come in. It'll put logs and tops on the ground so that you create visual barriers. I call that side cover. Something, again, that I've been talking about for a long time. Side cover and bedding is more important than anything. That's why a lot of times when you have open timber, but you have really good hills and elevation and topography change, then you'll find good bedding because the deer have side cover in the form of the hill. They have flat spots to bed on. It helps define where deer bed because of the elevation changes. But bedding, just dropping those trees every 30–40 yards, getting something on the ground. And you can drop, just because it's an oak doesn't mean it's a good oak. We cut oaks just in the last couple days. And if an oak is leaning, if it's a subordinate to dominant mass producing trees, those are the ones you can take out of there. Gives more life to the mass producers, and that's something you can do pretty quickly. But again, going back to mowing those trails really fast. Number 4. Water holes. 110-gallon tank, 150-gallon tank, a lot of digging, but after a couple hours of digging, maybe a pickaxe, right, Dylan? Then Dylan's dug a few in, and oh, it's a pain. You get down and there's a big rock and you have to move it over or something, but something you can do by hand, something you do in an afternoon. And I call May Whitetail Waterhole Month. That's official. I think it's on a calendar somewhere. But Whitetail Waterhole Month is May. Great time to get him in because you're still capturing some spring rains. You're getting it full. You're digging that below ground level so it captures water. Try not to be, it's easy for us to be lazy, me too, real busy. I want to get things done fast. But when you start putting that above ground level, I've seen deer have an aversion to that. They see this black line in the woods. It's not something that they readily are attracted to. It's something that sticks out. And now when you're in a low deer or deer hunter state, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, then you can get away with a little bit more with unnatural objects out in the woods and shapes. But when you get into the high hunter density areas, you really can't get away with much. And so that's why I encourage you to dig those water holes down. It's something that can be, if the deer are bedded dry and that water hole is located on their way to an afternoon food source, that could be money for afternoon movement. If a water hole is located between two dry bedding areas, another really high value attraction, because deer going from dry bedding to dry bedding, they're used to eating sticks and twigs, woody shrub tips, briars, acorns, and they need to wash that down. So it's a great cruising location between bedding areas in the morning, on the way to food in the afternoon. Something that can be done quickly. Don't cheat yourself or the deer and put in 30-gallon, 50-gallon, 60-gallon tanks. Always get to that 100 range or higher, and you'll find that water will last a lot longer. You know, you might get away with 30 gallons in a really wet year like we had maybe 2-3 years ago in 2019 or 18, but eventually your luck's going to run out, and that's going to be a dry water hole completely, and the deer won't be attracted in that area. They may use a trail that's 50 yards away, because once they lose that pattern of use on that water hole and it dries out, it takes them 2 or 3 weeks to come back, even when you add water to it, because they change their patterns elsewhere. And it takes a while for them to figure out that it's still there. So try water holes. And then number 5, mock scrapes. And this is incredibly easy. No scrape scent drippers, any garbage like that. Very easy to make. I have about 35 mock scrapes, mock scrape videos in my playlist on YouTube. They're very high value. When you see that stick hanging down, it's a vine in all our videos, and the bucks are hitting them, that's a mock scrape that I've created. Started creating mock scrapes in the mid-2000s and using rope to hang it from a branch. The more open it is, the longer the vine that I encourage you to use, 3/4 inch to 1 inch in diameter, generally 5 to 6 feet long. If it's very open, you might want to go 7, 8, 9 feet long. If it's within branches, you can go a little bit shorter. You want the bottom of that to be waist high so that deer can actually turn to their side and they want to rub their preorbital glands on it. If you put scent on that vine, if you put scent on an oak branch, on a jack pine branch, those are all high value licking branches that you can use as vertical mock scrapes, then you're diluting the natural scent that the deer leave on there. It's kind of anti what we do, but in the hunting industry, it's a way to get people to spend their dollars. So that's why we have scent companies. Otherwise, you're using natural, you're allowing the deer to leave their scent on there. The scrape itself on the ground is just a calling card. So when you put those out, take a rake, take your foot, make about a 3 to 4 foot diameter circle. Has to be on a flat surface. We encourage you to put them on trails only, right in front of your tree stand, because they're that high value. They'll pull a lot of trails into one. And if it's a high value mock scrape, bucks will hit those during the daylight hours. There's a lot of studies that show bucks hitting scrapes at night. Well, that's on pressured parcels, scientific parcels, where they're probably in there a lot. They might put a camera on a stick where it's spooking deer off of that scrape. It's out in the open. But when you're doing it smart, you're hanging that trail camera high, you're hiding the trail camera, you're putting it on a mock scrape in front of your bow stand. It can be the #1 attraction that you have, even over food plots, for the entire year, 365 days. Every deer that goes through there will go up to that doe, fawn, young buck or old, and leave their preorbital gland scent. And you can even see them targeting that from 20 yards back in the picture video. You'll see them staring at it. The next picture is closer, and they're looking right at that vine, and they're going in to leave their scent. And then sometimes they scrape the bottom during the rut when it's getting a little rutty, maybe when they lose their antlers or their velvet. They might make a scrape at that time, but typically 10 and a half months out of the year, they're just leaving their scent. Unless you had a camera there, you'd never know it, but it does define deer movement. And keep in mind, if they're looking at that mock scrape when they're coming into it, they're not paying attention to your camera, and they're certainly not paying attention to you in a tree stand nearby. So whether it's a veteran hunter or newbie or novice hunter, whatever your skill level is at, you can always appreciate the deer paying attention to something else besides you or your camera and getting spooked as they're passing by. And a mock scrape is the #1 attraction that you could have all year long, far more even than water holes. We see deer don't hit water holes much during the summer. They hit them during the rut a lot. You'll see them cruising, using those during the rut. It's incredible. They can be a high-powered attraction for a short period of time, but overall, if I had to bet and place a camera on something, it'd be a mock scrape. And notice I don't have rubbing posts, horizontal rubs in here. Why? Because naturally bucks only make rubs. A lot of rubs in the woods are only hit one time for the entire year. They're not hitting them 365/7. They're not hitting them day and night. You don't collect every doe, fawn, young buck and old that goes by a rub and leaves their scent. A lot of times, again, it's hit one time. Mock scrapes collect scent from often dozens of deer that come through the area over a week's period of time, and they'll do that 365, 52 weeks out of the year, and you'll enjoy the attraction level of that. And that's why we don't have mock, rubs on here or anything like that. I encourage you with each one of these. Food plot, incredible, powerful attraction. It takes a lot of work, time, energy to put in. A lot of these I'm using in combination, the red osier dogwoods, the travel quarters, the water holes, the mock scrapes. I'm using those to set up deer movement that I want to create between bedding and feeding, or between bedding and bedding for cruising bucks in the morning. And you're using these sweeteners of movement, these quick attractions, to actually define deer movement exactly where you need it to be. These are 5 hot, quick, hard-hitting improvements that you could actually make right now for this deer season. There's still time. There's still a lot of time. In fact, we're putting our mock scrapes in usually end of June, July, getting our cameras on them. Water holes we're putting in May. Travel quarters are good for right now. We're mowing out during the summertime. Red osier dogwood cuttings, you're doing that right now, March, April, getting those in the ground. And then conifer screening, we're planting that shortly here in the spring. But switchgrass, we have, look up 3 ways to plant switchgrass. We'll talk about each one of those methods. We actually have 4 ways, and we introduced a 5th in there too. But switchgrass can be done all the way through early mid-June with the right conditions. We talk about those conditions of moist ground, rain in the forecast, open ground, eliminating weeds. But a lot of these you can do right away, and they're hard-hitting habitat improvements that'll help your hunt this fall. And they're a great investment of not only your money, but your time. Hey guys, I really appreciate you watching today's video. We're out here having some fun today. We're planting some switchgrass, cutting some timber, making some bedding areas, but most importantly, we're putting it all together, and that's critical. Any habitat improvements you're making, you can't just make improvements because it's a good spot. You have to link those together so that helps your hunt this fall. Really, I encourage you to check out my web classes. The link is in the description. It's helped a lot of folks design their properties and do what we're out here having fun doing right now.